Hey everyone, ready for another deep dive? Today we're tackling a pretty intriguing topic, Christ consciousness and the pineal gland.
Ooh, that's a fascinating one.
Right, we're going to be looking at excerpts from a book called Activating Christ Consciousness, the Pineal Gland's Secret Teachings.
That sounds intriguing.
It really is. This book delves into some pretty mind-bending ideas. It blends spirituality and science in a way that I think a lot of our listeners will find super interesting.
Yeah, that intersection is always a hot topic.
Totally. Like, what if there's a part of our brain that can connect us to, like, a higher level of consciousness?
And what if ancient traditions and modern science actually agree on this?
That's exactly what we're going to explore. So the book kicks off with a pretty bold statement. It suggests that a powerful way to control people is by making them feel powerless.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, a little unsettling, right?
Definitely makes you think.
It does. The book argues that when people feel powerless, they're more likely to just blindly follow authority.
You know, that actually aligns with some of the things we see in sociology and psychology.
How so?
Well, when individuals feel like they lack control, they're more susceptible to following directives from authority figures.
That makes sense.
History is, unfortunately, full of examples of this.
Yeah, you're right. So this idea of feeling powerless in mind, how does Christ consciousness come into the picture?
Good question. The book describes Christ consciousness as this elevated state of awareness. It's a state of being where you transcend limitations and connect with something much greater, something infinite.
Okay, I'm kind of getting it. But how do you actually live in a state of Christ consciousness?
Right, how does it translate to everyday life? That's a big question, and the book does try to answer that.
Well, what does it say?
It emphasizes a few key things, like awakening to your true self, recognizing that you are part of something larger, a divine spark, so to speak.
I see.
Which kind of ties into ideas like self-actualization, right? That
Right.
drive to reach your full potential.
Yeah.
It also stresses becoming aware of your thoughts and actions, understanding how they impact your reality.
So it's like that saying, what you think you become.
Exactly, you hit the nail on the head. It's about recognizing the power of your mind to shape your experiences.
That's deep.
And finally, it emphasizes living from a higher level of self-awareness, one that's characterized by kindness, compassion, and transcendence of the ego.
So it sounds like if feeling powerless can lead to being controlled, then Christ consciousness, with its emphasis on self-awareness, is kind of like the antidote.
That's a really interesting observation. And yeah, I think you're picking up what the book is putting down and about reclaiming your power through understanding and connecting to something bigger than yourself.
Got it. So where does the pineal gland fit into all of this?
Well, the book claims that this tiny gland in our brain might be the key to unlocking Christ consciousness. It describes it as a bridge between the physical and spiritual realms.
Wait, the pineal gland, the one that regulates sleep. That's our gateway to higher consciousness.
Yeah, it does sound like a bit of a leap, doesn't it?
It kind of does.
But it's interesting to consider the historical context. For centuries, many cultures have been fascinated by the pineal gland. They often associate it with the third eye, like the eye of Horus in ancient Egypt.
Oh, right.
They view it as this source of intuition and spiritual insight.
So is this another area where ancient wisdom and modern science might intersect? Like, what do scientists say about the link between the pineal gland and spiritual experiences?
Well, scientifically, we know that the pineal gland produces melatonin.
Right. The hormone that regulates our sleep.
Exactly. And it plays a big role in our circadian rhythms. But the source material points to some research that suggests the pineal gland might do even more than that. It might actually connect us to realms beyond our normal perception because of how sensitive it is to light and its role in changing brainwave frequencies.
Okay, so I can see how they're drawing that connection. But what does that connection actually feel like? What does it mean for the pineal gland to act as a bridge between the realm of the senses and this heavenly spiritual realm?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's something that has fascinated spiritual seekers and scientists for a long time. Some people describe it as this intense feeling of oneness, a dissolving of boundaries between you and everything else, or even a sense of accessing knowledge that goes beyond our five senses.
Wow, that sounds pretty profound. I can see why people would be so drawn to this idea.
It definitely captures the imagination. Now, the scientific community is still researching the pineal gland's role in all of this, but there are some intriguing areas of study. For example, researchers are looking into how different brainwave frequencies are linked to these altered states of consciousness and how the pineal gland's production of melatonin and serotonin might influence those brainwaves.
So those ancient traditions might have been onto something when they talked about the pineal gland as a gateway to higher realms.
It's a possibility some scientists are starting to consider. But it's important to remember that much of this research is still in its early stages.
Right, right. Okay, I'm definitely intrigued. Let's get back to Christ consciousness for a sec. The book mentions three key characteristics. The first is awakening to one's true self, seeing yourself as a divine extension of a higher power. Can you unpack that a bit?
Sure, it's about recognizing that spark of the divine within, understanding that we are all interconnected and part of something much larger than ourselves.
Makes sense. What about the second characteristic, becoming aware of your thoughts and actions?
That one highlights the power of our minds. It's about understanding that our thoughts really do have an impact on our reality. It encourages us to be more mindful, to pay attention to our thoughts and how they shape our experiences.
So taking responsibility for the energy we put out into the world.
Precisely. Our thoughts aren't just these fleeting things. They have a real power to influence our lives and the lives of those around us.
That's a powerful concept. And finally, there's living from a higher level of self-awareness.
Right. The book describes this as living with kindness, compassion, and a transcendence of the ego. It's about moving beyond that self-centered perspective and embracing a more expansive view of the world.
So basically, becoming a more loving and compassionate person. But how do you actually do that? How do you shift from a self-centered view to one focused on kindness and compassion?
That's where things get a little more mystical. The book dives into the concept of the Ajna chakra from Vedic tradition, which is associated with the pineal gland.
Okay, so remind me about chakras. What are they again, and how do they relate to all of this Christ consciousness stuff?
Well, in various Eastern spiritual traditions like Buddhism and Hinduism, chakras are considered energy centers in the body. It's like they're swirling vortexes of energy
Okay.
that correspond to different aspects of our well-being, physical, emotional, and spiritual.
So they aren't like actual physical structures.
Not in the traditional sense of anatomy, it's more of an energetic framework for understanding these subtle energies that flow through our bodies.
Okay. And this Ajna chakra, the one associated with the pineal gland, what's its deal?
The Ajna chakra, also known as the third eye chakra, is located right between the eyebrows. It's associated with intuition, wisdom, and spiritual insight.
Okay.
The book suggests that activating this chakra is key to activating the pineal gland, which is also key to accessing Christ consciousness.
So how do you activate a chakra? It all sounds a bit, I don't know, esoteric.
The book seems to draw a pretty strong connection between the Ajna chakra and the pineal gland, suggesting that energy work and meditation can stimulate this energy center and awaken its potential.
Energy work, what does that even mean?
Energy work includes a variety of practices that aim to influence the flow of energy in the body, things like Reiki, Qigong, or even certain types of yoga.
And how does meditation fit into all of this?
Meditation is considered a key tool for working with chakras and subtle energy. The book describes the specific pineal gland activation meditation technique.
Oh, okay.
That involves breath work and visualization.
Breath work. That seems to be a recurring theme in a lot of these spiritual practices.
It really is. Breath is super powerful. It's the essence of life, and when we consciously regulate our breath, we can have a big influence on our physical and mental states.
So how does this pineal gland activation meditation work? What do you actually do?
Well, the book really emphasizes deep breathing and directing energy from the lower chakras up to the Ajna chakra, where the pineal gland is. You visualize this energy flowing upward like a stream, activating and awakening the third eye.
So I'm hearing this theme again of ancient wisdom and modern science kind of meeting. Like, it's fascinating to think that these ancient practices might be tapping into the same biological mechanisms that scientists are studying today.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting point of convergence. While ancient traditions might not have had the same language of neuroscience that we use now, they did develop these really intricate systems for understanding consciousness and energy.
And now modern science is starting to validate some of those ancient insights.
Right. And the study of brainwave frequencies is a good example. Our brains produce different electrical patterns or brainwaves depending on our level of activity. When we're alert and focused, our brains produce beta waves. But when we relax or meditate, those brainwave frequencies slow down. And they shift into alpha or theta waves, which are associated with relaxation, creativity, and even spiritual insight.
So the idea is that by doing things like meditation, we can actually intentionally shift our brainwave patterns into these more, I guess, receptive states.
That's the idea.
Okay.
And the pineal gland seems to play a role in this process too. Research shows that the pineal gland, because it produces melatonin, influences these brainwave frequencies.
Okay, yeah, that's making more sense to me now.
Mm.
But what does this actually feel like? Have you ever experienced these kinds of shifts in consciousness yourself?
I have. In my own meditation practice, I've definitely experienced moments of profound stillness, clarity, and a kind of expanded awareness that goes beyond my normal perception. It's hard to put into words, but it feels like a glimpse into something much deeper, like a realm beyond what we normally experience with our five senses.
Wow, that's amazing. You're really making me want to try this pineal gland activation meditation. The book also talks about a specific time to do it, between 1:00 a.m. and 4:00 a.m. They call it Brahma Muhurta in Sanskrit, and say it's especially good for spiritual practices. Is there any, science to back that up?
There's no scientific evidence to prove that Brahma Muhurta is a better time for meditation than any other. But research does show that meditation, no matter what time of day you do it, can have tons of benefits for our physical and mental health.
So it's more about the consistency of the practice, not necessarily the specific time?
It seems like it. The important thing is to find a time that works for you and make meditation a regular habit.
That makes sense. Though I gotta admit, getting up at 3 a.m. to meditate doesn't sound too fun. Maybe I'll stick to a more reasonable hour for now. So we've talked a lot about the science and the practices, but I want to circle back to those three characteristics of Christ consciousness: awakening to one's true self, becoming aware of thoughts and actions, and living from a higher level of self-awareness. How can people actually cultivate these qualities in their daily lives?
That's the real challenge, right? It's easy to understand these things on an intellectual level, but it's harder to actually put them into practice.
So where do we even begin?
I think it all starts with awareness. Pay attention to your thoughts, your emotions, your reactions. Notice how you interact with the world and other people.
Okay, so being more mindful.
Yeah.
But how do we go from just observing to actually changing our behavior?
It's definitely a process. It takes practice. Something that might help is to ask yourself throughout the day, is this thought, word, or action aligned with the qualities of Christ consciousness? Is it kind? Is it compassionate? Is it coming from my ego, or is it coming from a place of love?
That's a good practical tip, like a little check-in to make sure you're staying on track. But what about those times when we mess up, when we react in a way that isn't aligned with those qualities?
That's where self-compassion becomes so important. Don't beat yourself up about it. Just notice it, acknowledge it, and gently redirect your energy back towards the qualities you want to cultivate.
It sounds like it's all about making conscious choices in each moment.
You got it. Recognizing that we actually have the power to choose how we respond to life's challenges, and that we can choose to cultivate the qualities that will bring us more peace, happiness, and fulfillment.
And maybe even help us tap into that Christ consciousness.
Maybe. But even if we don't ever reach that ultimate state, I think the journey itself can be really transformative.
I like that perspective. It's not about achieving some distant goal. It's about enjoying the process of growth.
Exactly. It's about becoming more aware, more compassionate, and more connected to ourselves and everything around us.
This has been so insightful. I feel like I have a much better grasp of Christ consciousness, and I'm even more curious about the pineal gland now.
It's a really fascinating area to explore where ancient wisdom meets modern science.
It really makes you wonder what other mysteries are hidden inside of us, just waiting to be uncovered.
That's the beauty of being human, isn't it? There's always something more to learn and discover about ourselves and this universe we live in.
Well said. This conversation has definitely piqued my curiosity, and I'm sure our listeners are feeling it too. But before we get too carried away, I think it's time to take a break. We'll be back soon to continue our deep dive into Christ consciousness and the pineal glands. Stay tuned. I'm still thinking about something you mentioned before the break. All this talk about altered states of consciousness and the pineal gland. If those ancient traditions were right about the pineal gland being a bridge to other realms, what does that even say about the nature of reality itself?
That's a really deep question, one that philosophers and mystics have been wrestling with forever. I mean, if we even just consider the possibility that consciousness isn't limited to our physical brain, that opens up a whole new way of looking at things. It suggests that maybe there are dimensions beyond what we can normally perceive, realms that we can access through things like meditation or by activating the pineal gland.
It's like maybe those ancient cultures weren't just being metaphorical when they talked about other realms. They were talking about real experiences they were having.
It's definitely a possibility worth considering. And it brings us back to that idea of Christ consciousness. The book suggests that achieving this state isn't just about personal enlightenment, it's about understanding that we are all interconnected and that we can actually contribute to a higher collective consciousness.
So it's not just about like meditating in a cave and reaching nirvana. It's about taking that awareness and living it out in the world.
Right. It's about bringing those qualities of compassion, kindness, and unity into our everyday lives and interactions. The book really stresses that our thoughts and intentions create a ripple effect. They affect not only our own reality, but the collective consciousness, too.
So the more people who embody Christ consciousness, the more we actually shift the energy of the whole planet. It sounds kind of like the 100th monkey effect.
It is similar, yeah. It's that idea that when enough people embrace a new way of thinking or being, it creates a sort of tipping point that can influence the collective consciousness and maybe even lead to really widespread change.
That's a pretty powerful and hopeful idea. But it also makes me think about the opposite. Like if positive thoughts can create positive change, can negative thoughts and emotions contribute to the problems we see in the world?
That's a really important question. If we're open to the possibility that consciousness is all interconnected and our thoughts have that ripple effect, then it would make sense that negativity could spread and create disharmony.
So then we have a responsibility to not just cultivate positive thoughts within ourselves, but also be mindful of the energy we're putting out into the world.
Exactly. I think that's a key takeaway from all of this. Exploring Christ consciousness isn't just about our own personal transformation. It's about recognizing how interconnected we are and taking responsibility for our part in creating a more loving and harmonious world.
That's a big concept, but also really inspiring. It's like each of us actually has the power to make a difference, even if it's a small one.
I agree. And it brings us all the way back to that point about feeling powerless. When we embrace Christ consciousness, we take back our power. Not through dominance or control, but through understanding, compassion, and connecting with something greater than ourselves.
It's realizing that we're not just isolated individuals, we're part of this huge interconnected web of consciousness.
And that realization can be incredibly freeing. It helps us move past fear and separation and tap into the source of love and wisdom that's always there.
I'm really feeling the power of this concept now. It's not just some abstract idea, it's a real shift in perspective that can really affect our lives and the world.
And the great thing is, it's a journey anyone can take. It doesn't require special skills or knowledge. You just have to be willing to open your mind and heart to a new way of being.
So what's one little thing our listeners could do today to start cultivating Christ consciousness in their own lives?
I would say start with gratitude. Just take a few minutes every day to appreciate the good things in your life, no matter how small they seem. That simple practice can really shift your focus away from the negative and towards the positive, and it can help you feel that sense of connection.
That's great advice. And maybe we can all give that pineal gland activation meditation a try too. Who knows what we might find?
It's definitely worth exploring. Well, as we wrap up our deep dive into Christ consciousness and the pineal gland, I hope everyone listening is feeling inspired to start their own journey of self-discovery and embrace the power of their own consciousness.
This has been a really amazing exploration. It feels like we've only scratched the surface of this whole topic.
There's definitely always more to learn. But I think we've given our listeners a good starting point for their own exploration.
And if this deep dive piqued your interest, we encourage you to go out and find more information. Experiment with the practices we talked about and see what works for you. Remember, the journey of self-discovery never really ends. There's always something new to discover.
Keep your minds open, stay curious, and keep exploring the mysteries both inside and outside of yourselves. Until next time.